What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 3, another F1 focused episode. Shocker, shocker. You guys think I like F1? But today's episode is going to be Abu Dhabi and the hobby. We're going to be discussing the potential outcomes of on the card market, depending on what happens tomorrow in Abu Dhabi. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Not a ton of slides to go through today. I think only like 9 or 10, but they're going to be on screen for most of the time. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The two main points that we're going to be considering is we're going to be considering or comparing Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen to contemporaries in other sports that are on similar trajectories. So for Hamilton, it's going to be Tom Brady and LeBron James, and for Max, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes and Giannis. Tried to keep it consistent across both sports: football, basketball. And we're lucky that it really matched up almost perfectly with all of these players having some kind of championship addition to their legacies and their career totals here recently within the past year and a half. So outside of winning the actual championship, it seems very simple that, you win a championship, your cards are going to go up because you won. But there's so much other stuff going on that we need to acknowledge. So here's the list of the main factors that I came up with when we are looking at the main card. Like, we'll talk about the main card for each of these three guys that is readily available in PSA 10. We're not talking about the ultra high-end, like super crazy, like impossible to find stuff. I'm not talking about like exquisite RPAs. We want to focus on stuff that there's enough out there for everyone, because this market is going to be more applicable towards for this exercise, as opposed to stuff where you're seeing one sale a year or stuff like that. So the things we want to look at are the overall market at the time of the event. The overall market is the one thing that can really change the outcome of a price increase or reduction. It is the single most important factor on this list. Like I said, you can have a card that should go up but goes down, or vice versa, just because of what's happening in the overall market. Whether there's a lot of items already that are listed, or we'll get into a couple of the specifics here when we actually get to the examples. But that is the single most controlling factor on this outside factors list. The number 2 one is the age of the player at the time of their event. Number 3 is going to be their prior accomplishments. Number 4 is going to be their team affiliation and popularity. Number 5 is the popularity of their sport. Number 6 is, do they have other card options available. Number 7 and 8 kind of go together. It's print runs and the PSA Pop Report. So we'll dive into it head first here with the GOATs. It's going to be Lewis Hamilton, Tom Brady, and LeBron. So Hamilton, we're looking at his Topps Chrome Sapphire card number 1. Brady, the 2000 Bowman Chrome number 236. And LeBron, the 0304 Topps Chrome number 111. So you can see the pop report there for all three. You can also see the total cards graded, and you can see the percentage of PSA 10. So that gives us some very important information. 1, as it stands now, how many cards are in the pop report for a PSA 10. 2, what percentage of cards get a PSA 10? Is it easy to PSA 10? Is it difficult? It kind of helps us let us know what kind of bump there should be from raw to an 8 to a 9 to a 10. And then 3 is how many total copies have been graded. For the Brady and LeBron, I don't know if anyone's ever figured out the exact print runs, but for Lewis, we know that the Sapphire card has a print run somewhere between 2,000 and 2,100 copies. So in context, when you look at the pop report of the Brady and LeBron, how graded copies are double that for Brady and almost 4 times that amount for LeBron, 3.5 times for LeBron, you can kind of understand the scarcity that we're working with for Hamilton. You also have the pricing chart down at the bottom. You have pre-championship, post-championship, and the current price. So the quick evaluation here is, obviously we don't have anything for Lewis because the event hasn't happened yet, but Brady's about the same price currently as it was pre-championship, and same thing for LeBron, almost the exact same price. You'll see there that Brady's cards had a $4,000 spike, a 20% spike, where LeBron's cards saw about a 16% drop post-championship. And this is where common sense says, like, you win a championship, how does your cards drop? We have to look at all those other factors. So the factors here, I'll try not to spend too much time going through each one. I'll try and just give a little tidbit as to why I mark them as positive, negative, or neutral. We start off with the overall market. Brady was positive when Brady's most recent championship hit. That was the market was at its absolute hottest it's ever been ever. That was in the beginning of February. So January, February, we saw record sales for every single card pretty much ever. if it was listed at that time. So Brady came in at the exact right time. So you saw his card. You saw a giant spike leading up to the Super Bowl just because the market was so hot. But even from the date after the Super Bowl to probably I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks after, you still saw an increase, a decent increase for Brady before the card started to level back off and come down. Hamilton's kind of in a neutral market right now. The market's actually fairly stable. It's probably about as stable as it's been in the last year and a half since the COVID boom happened. And LeBron, unfortunately, was in a negative market. LeBron, because of the way that things played out with COVID, his card jumped up so high right before the finals, like when the NBA bubble restarted, and there were so many copies out there available that so many people were trying to cash in. So many people were just listing the top Chrome. You saw it plummet from I want to say it was I can't think of the percentage off the top of my head, but it went down a lot. It went down a lot. I should have wrote down the exact number. I apologize, but it was simply because the market, there were so many copies on the market and so many people selling. The fact that he won, lost, he could have punched a baby, nothing would have mattered because the market had already dictated that the price got so high that everyone that already had a copy, they were basically, forced to sell. I mean, you never forced to do anything, but they were almost forced to sell to take those profits. So that's how the market status can really dictate the overall card values, where not so much the event has anything to do with it. So it was actually a great example for both of those guys, seeing where what a hot market can do for you and what a negative market can do for you when there's a sell-off going on. Number 2 is the age of the players. Positive for Brady and Hamilton, kind of neutral for LeBron. LeBron, we kind of know the shelf life of the basketball player. So we knew at the time he probably had a couple of years left in him. No one's ever really been able to defy age as a basketball player. The drop-off is usually quick and painful. So he was kind of at a point where we could safely expect, a couple more years left out of him, and that, that was kind of baked into where we already were expecting him to be. So with Hamilton and Brady, though, those are both positives too for different reasons. Hamilton at age 36 right now, it's a race car. He can drive for as long as he wants. Essentially, you have car drivers. I mean, not recently, but you guys that drove into their 50s. So Hamilton's age is a positive because he still might have who knows how many years of what we're going to call his prime left. And Brady's also a positive because he did something no one's ever done at his age. He's at age 41 and he took a team to the Super Bowl and won it. We've never seen that type of production at that age from a quarterback, so that also gives him a boost as far as when we look at the age of players and what we expect moving forward from them. Prior accomplishments don't really matter that much for the GOATs, but I did mark LeBron and Hamilton as positive and Brady as neutral. Brady's only neutral because he is the unquestioned GOAT in the NFL for quarterbacks. LeBron and Hamilton, more so LeBron than Hamilton. You can argue against either of those guys if you want to. Hamilton is much closer to being in the unquestioned GOAT category than LeBron would be, just based on public perception, whether you believe it or not, or agree with it. It doesn't really matter for this exercise. All that matters is what the general population believes. Excuse me, tripping over my words here. So positive for LeBron and Hamilton, neutral for Brady on that one. Just because adding on, when you're not the unquestioned GOAT, when you start adding on and getting closer and closer and building your argument stronger, that actually helps you, obviously. So when it comes to discussing who's the greatest of all time. The team affiliation and popularity one, we have positive for Hamilton, neutral for Brady and LeBron. Positive for Hamilton, and I say this thinking that you could say the same thing about Tom Brady, but for this specific title, obviously Brady was on a different team. When you think of like Mercedes race cars, Lewis Hamilton is Mercedes, right? Tom Brady is the Patriots. LeBron James is not anything. LeBron James is not the Lakers. Kobe's the Lakers, so when you build that kind of career over a single team or a single affiliation, whatever it might be from sport to sport to sport, it gives you a boost. When you don't go from team to team to team to team. We don't see it very often anymore, but I mean Brady's one of the closest things that we've got to that, honestly, in the past, I would say 15 or 20 years for a player of his caliber staying with one team for the length of his career. But that gives a positive to Hamilton if he keeps going on with Mercedes. It's always a better look than switching teams and being kind of a mercenary. like LeBron, like he goes somewhere, just takes over the team, just wins a couple championships, which is cool. It's great in its own right. But some people are turned off by the fact that he left Cleveland and then he decided to leave Miami and then he sold out and went to the Lake, whatever you want to call it. Like again, it's not about what you think. We have to look at what the general public perceives and how that might affect the card prices. Not whether or not it's right, wrong, irrational. Doesn't really matter for this stuff. But we move on to the popularity of the sport. You have LeBron and Hamilton at positive, neutral at Brady. It's very simple for this one. Basketball, worldwide sport. F1, definitely a worldwide sport. Literally, they race in dozens of different countries. Football, unfortunately for Brady, just a U.S. sport. You never know if you have some of the really high-end stuff or if this stuff gets really, really expensive somewhere down the line. You never know where that buyer is going to come from. And just being a football player, you're probably limiting your potential market because there's just tons of places around the world that have absolutely zero interest. Zippy in American football. So, positive for LeBron and Hamilton, neutral for Brady. Other card options, positive for Hamilton, neutral for Brady, negative for LeBron. LeBron has so many cards in 03-04. He's literally in every single set and insert set and subset that you could possibly think of. So, that really hurts when you're looking at price. If you can't afford the Topps Chrome, you can find plenty of other really nice options out there. Brady, to a lesser extent, he has some other nice options out there. Unfortunately for him, a lot of his cards are featured in his college uniform, which hurts. So he doesn't have a ton of options, but there definitely are other options out there for Brady. Hamilton, 100% is going to be marked as a positive for this because he has really nothing. F1's general scarcity this year, that'll drive the future growth of the Sapphire and the Chrome too. So just overall positive for F1 in general and therefore Hamilton. 7-8 is the print runs and PSA Pop report. Again, we kind of covered this a little bit earlier on the last one, but this is going to be a positive for Hamilton and Brady and a negative for LeBron. Again, just so much LeBron out there, not that much Hamilton and Brady. You look at Brady's PSA 10 Pop on the Bowman Chrome, I think it was $10.99, and Hamilton only has 2,000-ish total copies of the card in general. So you would think that, if it gets to the point where the majority of those Hamilton cards wind up at PSA, you're probably looking at a pop report similar to Brady, but with really no other collecting options out there. So that goes into Hamilton's favor as well. And again, I'm focusing a little bit more on Hamilton and Max when we get to him for this exercise, as opposed to Brady and LeBron, because this is about tomorrow in racing. So if you want to just check out a summary here of each of the three players, you can kind of see how you have to weigh these factors. Like you have 8 different factors listed there, plus the actual outcome of the championship. It's very easy with players that are already established like this. So I'll read off the Brady one for you. I marked him down as already the unquestioned GOAT. He was already priced as such. The strong market resulted in a small uptick in prices for a short period of time before leveling off to a number that's basically on par with his pre-championship prices, and his largest spike occurred in the month leading up to the Super Bowl. So for him, the market was the greatest factor that determined it. And again, it corrected itself once the overall market dropped back down. Literally almost nothing to do with winning a championship affected Tom Brady's cards. For LeBron here, I have him forever in the GOAT discussion. You add more titles. So adding more titles to his resume was and is still very important to get him to that next level of unquestioned greatness. But a lack of overall scarcity for his key rookie and a massive run-up in price during the NBA bubble led to a market flooding because everyone was trying to sell and the subsequent price drop. So any price increase that may have occurred was completely nullified by the sheer amount of sellers trying to cash in on a $5,000 plus profit over a 2-month period. And then for Hamilton, he's widely considered the GOAT. Some people say Schumacher or Senna. But an 8th title would put him alone at the top of the history books for the fastest growing and probably most popular sport in a true worldwide market. So with a lack of other collecting options coupled with a low population report due to high grading costs currently, that puts Hamilton in a very, very positive hobby position, considering that his PSA 10 is only about $1,500 when LeBron and Brady are already into the tens of thousands when they won their last championships. So unique situations there. Now we move on to the young guys. So we have the same slide here for Verstappen, Giannis, and Mahomes. You can see the pop report very similar for Verstappen, a little bit less than what Hamilton is, but the PSA 10 percentage is much higher. Giannis's Prism, you got the pop report at 2669. Total cards graded is 4156. That is for his 1314 Prism 290. I should mention that for those of you that can't see the screen that are just listening. the Verstappen that we're talking about, is also the Topps Chrome Sapphire for him. It's card number 6. And then for Mahomes, we're going to be using the 2017 Prism number 269. It is a silver prism. That year, there were no silver inserts. All the rookies had the silver prism finish to it. So people get a little bit confused about that, but it is labeled as a prism silver. But technically, it's just the base card. So for those guys, you see Giannis pre-championship was about $1,600. Post-championship was $1,500, and his current pricing is $1,650. Mahomes was an interesting one because I put an extra line in there because he was the only one that had his championship happen pre-COVID times. So it's a nice little look into how things worked a couple years ago before the market has completely evolved and changed in the past 18 months, 24 months or so. So Mahomes pre-championship was about a $1,200 card. The day after the championship, there were many sales in the $1,800 range, but then about a week after that, it dropped back down to about $1,200. Currently, it's at $7,500. Again, you can explain that very easily because he saw the giant spike just like everyone else once the COVID card bubble, and I call it a bubble, not actually meaning it's a bubble, but the COVID card increase is what brought his up. So his championship occurred before there was a lot of stuff going on. But again, you can see how the overall market, barely brought his card up for the actual championship win. But when the entire market rose, his card went way up, went 6 times up almost. So as we look at the factors here, I'll now that we've kind of explained how they work, I'll be a little bit shorter on this one. But the overall market status, Max and Mahomes were in neutral markets again before COVID for Mahomes. Max right now, so it's the same as Hamilton. Giannis was in a negative market, kind of suffering from the same thing that LeBron was suffering to. That card spiked up to over $8,000 at one point, so there were so many copies, and it was just slowly trickling down because of the sheer amount of copies out there that it wasn't really a great time for Giannis to be winning a championship. But it is what it is. Sometimes winning is losing, I guess. The age of the players, we have Giannis at a neutral, just because, again, basketball primes a lot shorter. So he has, hopefully, we're hoping for 8-10 years of 10 years would be a long time for him. I think he's 27 now. So we're looking at maybe like an 8-year stretch of prime for him. So when guys who are really based off athleticism like Giannis, their declines tend to be quicker. So we're hoping that he's got a full 8 to 10 years left in him. But he's a little bit older than what you would want for this type of list for winning your first championship. Max positive, Mahomes positive as well. So his first championship, he was early 20s, 25, 24. I don't know his exact birthday. I think he was 25 at the time of winning. So again, quarterbacks, you still have a solid. Definitely a solid 10 years. Hopefully a solid 12 to 15. And Verstappen, by far and away, if there could be a double positive, a positive plus, that's where Max would be at age 23 right now. So prior accomplishments, positive for all. They're all very, very accomplished. I won't go through the list, but you got Giannis, 5-time All-Pro, 5-time All-Star. Mahomes, 3-time All-Pro in 3 seasons. MVP for Giannis. Max has all kinds of accomplishments, being the youngest person to do whatever. We'll get into them for Max a little bit later on when we get into the actual racing part of this stuff. But team affiliation, popularity, positive for all. They're all, like I said, centrally. It's not even the right word at all. It doesn't mean anything. They're all on the same team that they've always been on. So Giannis kind of is Milwaukee basketball at this point. Mahomes took a very popular fan base in the Chiefs and kind of reinvigorated them. Max Verstappen's always been with Red Bull. So yeah, all positive for the team affiliation and popularity. The popularity of the sport, literally the exact same as the last slide, which is Max Giannis popular, Mahomes neutral. Again, because football, not a worldwide sport. Other card options, we have Max and Giannis in the positive, negative in the Mahomes. Mahomes, you thought LeBron was bad? Look at Mahomes. My God. You want to see a guy that has every card out there, Mahomes is in there. Giannis, on the other hand, being a mid-first round pick, and not someone that was really on most people's radar. There's literally insert sets in 13-14 basketball that feature 25 or 30 rookies, all the best rookies, and he's not in them. So that speaks to how Giannis was perceived going into that year. But it just helps his current card market because there's not as many options out there. Also, the main competitor for Prism, which is Optic these days, didn't exist back then. So Optic didn't come out until 16, 17. So you only really had select as far as another similar type of card for Giannis to compete with, which is nice. Max, we already discussed, same exact thing as Lewis. Print runs and pop report, again, Max going to be positive for the same things we discussed as Lewis. They're no different. Giannis also going to be positive. Again, 13-14 Prism, not a highly produced product. There was no retail versions of it. Mahomes is neutral because while there is a ton of his 17 Prism cards out there, they're really tough to grade, real tough. That's going to have the lowest PSA grade percentage out there for anything on this list at 21.4%. So that's what brings Mahomes into the neutral, at least for the PSA 10. For the rest of the stuff, it kind of hurts having that many copies out there, but for the PSA 10, it definitely is. It definitely almost cancels out with the low dime rate, as the kids like to say. So, summarizing the players here, trying to figure out like where all these factors, like what's more important and how they work. Mahomes, his first Super Bowl occurred right before the card boom, which explains the massive price increase, not after winning the Super Bowl, but months after that actual event, including another Super Bowl loss, which is kind of ironic. His price went up 6x, and he lost the Super Bowl. So that should be the indicator that you guys need to know about how the overall market can affect card prices as opposed to actual events that occur on the field or track. While his endless card options, his Prism Rookie is a tough grade, which is the key factor that helps the price stay high because of it's scarce in a PSA 10. For Giannis, team sport where championships are generally held in the highest regard for individual stars, he grabbed one at the beginning of his prime. Unfortunately, because he probably has the shortest amount of prime left, it hurts him to get to his GOAT, we'll call it the GOAT level titles. It's going to be a difficult task with only one going into your age 27 season. So Prism Rookie was in a massive tailspin already because COVID prices were already starting to correct at that point. Like I said, they went up to almost, I think it was over $8,000, and they started coming right back down, just like what happened with the LeBron cards. So because they dropped almost all the way, the bottom almost completely fell out of those right at the time that he won his championship. There was a small window for a price increase. You saw a couple $100 price increase for a few sales before it dropped almost immediately back down to that $1,500 or $1,600 floor. Now Max here is the youngest player in the group, which is great for him. He has the most experience, success, and years in his prime left. You're looking at like probably 16, 17 years left for Max to keep adding on. But he also has the lowest buy-in to obtain his best card, and the overall scarcity that is in F1, to me it represents like a rare value for a player that is widely considered to be like, the next big thing, the next GOAT, or someone that's on that GOAT trajectory. So just like Hamilton, very, very positive position for Max, I think, in the hobby. So I think it's pretty clear that we've figured out that, you're not going to see a price spike. It's just not going to happen. Winning a title does not mean that the day after, all right, we did it, my card doubled. It doesn't work like that. And it's because, that thinking is kind of archaic. We used to, years ago, decades ago, people would say, I'm going to hold until he makes the Hall of Fame. I'm going to figure this out. We know what's going to happen. I mean, with analytics and all these sites and content and stuff out there, we kind of know already who's going to go to the Hall of Fame, who has the ability to win titles, who's got, the chance to do this and that. That's all we do is project stuff out. And that's like one of the main factors that plays into why winning doesn't actually raise prices. So the industry valuing possibility and trajectory more than actual accomplishments is the number one item on this list here. Like I said, we can figure out that X player at X age putting up these stats, and you do it over this amount of time, will give us this, and this. Then we can compare it to someone else. So, the MVPs, the titles, all that stuff. We expect players to grow, get better. If you're this good at 21, how good are you going to be at 24? So we expect linear growth, and all those titles and MVPs should come with that. We expect that to happen. And when we start expecting stuff like that and figuring things out, we kind of, bake that into the price. The possibility of someone, if you look at the third bullet point here, the possibility of someone being the next whoever, the next Tom Brady, the next whatever, and the anticipation of all that stuff that I just explained, we know that this card, whatever it might be at, $100 is too cheap when we look at, this guy could be the next Tom Brady. His card's only $100 right now. Brady's is $100,000, and we drive it up. So when that happens, when you win that first, like when this young player wins that first singular award title, whatever it may be, an MVP or a championship, it's not an event that will create a price jump. It's an event that justifies the price jump from where they started to where they are now. So that's the really important thing to remember, is that there's different ways for cards to go up, but the biggest trend recently has been investing, and we are, as a hobby, way too far ahead of ourselves. So we need these first, second, third titles and stuff like that to occur to justify the prices that they're currently at. So, and even for the players, for the GOAT level players, it kind of follows the same thing. Once they're already established as the best, it's really hard to grow unless you do something like rewriting like the history books of sports, like kind of almost what Tom Brady is doing right now. Like if he wins 3 or 4 more championships, like can you imagine? Like even 2, even 1, like plays till he's 45. Like can you imagine like how much better he would be than everyone? He'd be like in like Gretzky status. So that's when you really have to start seeing a jump from where you are now into like a whole nother tier of player. And the way you see that jump with the younger players is, you'll look at like back-to-back titles, or 3 MVPs in 4 years, or 3 titles in 5 years. Something where it puts them ahead of the trajectory, or at least matches the trajectory that we had them on, before anything actually happened, before any actual events occurred. We need them to continue that trajectory and get ahead of it to start seeing the price jump. And the great thing is the closer you get, as long as you can stay on that line, like if you can stay on that trajectory, the closer you get down it, right? Because, injuries can happen. Players can get bad. They can get traded. For F1, their car might not be good. Whatever it might be. The farther along in your career that you can stay on that trajectory, you see the slow increase, and you see it go, 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 go. But you'll really see like a spike, which is what a lot of people think would happen, after tomorrow's race, is a spike. You really see that when they get ahead of the trajectory, and you really, really need a dominant stretch for something like that to happen. Or, something really, really crazy. Like, if Max won, the first 7 races next season, he hit pole, fastest lap, and won the first 7 races, okay, like, that's like, wow. Something like that. If he led, like, wire to wire in all of them. Or if, LeBron put up, like, a 60, 15, 15 triple-double, like, oh my goodness. Like, stuff like that is when you see spikes. When you see really, really crazy things happen in a single game or a small stretch of season, when you see the spikes. But long-term spikes don't really happen until you start getting into the next tier of the, I guess we'll call it like the linear progression to becoming the greatest of all time. Once you get out of tier A, of which is like identified as, you could be this, and then, tier B is like, all right, you got a title, you got an MVP, like now you're in like the really, really good category, like potential Hall of Famer category. Getting out of the potential Hall of Famer category into the greatest of all time, one is tough. That's the hard one. That's where, most people fail, and it, not really their fault. It's that hard. There's 1, 2 GOATs, when you talk about these sports. So it is not an easy thing to accomplish. But, it's a hard concept. It's a hard concept to grasp, that winning a title doesn't help your card prices tomorrow. So it's. But when you think about it as a whole, it makes a lot of sense. So a couple more things, though, about Max and Lewis specifically here that I want to touch on. We'll start with Lewis first. So Lewis, currently 36 years old. His career was kind of a weird one. He won his first title at age 23 and didn't win his second one at age 29. So he would not have been on that trajectory, right? Not even close to that trajectory that we're talking about with these younger guys. The first title at 23, he might have been on there for a little bit, but then, he finished 4th, he finished 5th. Because his first two seasons, he finished 2nd. He missed the title by 1 point. And then his second season, he won it. But then he didn't win another one until his second season with Mercedes, when he was 29 years old. So he would have been a guy that you would have seen him on that trajectory to start if today was then. He would have been on that trajectory to start, and you would have seen him fall off. And there would have been a big dip. There would have been a big old dip there come year 3, come year 4, year 5, when he wasn't winning anything, especially after he switched cars, and then like, okay, this might be it. He might do it now. And his first season didn't go great at Mercedes. It wasn't until he won his second title, and then things really took off. And this is what I was mentioning earlier about that dominant stretch. He had one of those dominant stretches. So, he got the benefit of racing in addition to being an unbelievable driver, an unbelievable top 3 unquestioned probably. He also, when you couple that with driving the most dominant car in F1 history for the longest time that someone's had a dominant car in F1 history. You're talking an 8-year stretch of having literally the best vehicle on the road. It's no surprise that he was able to hammer home 6 more championships in 8 years. So, 6 and 7 technically, if you take out his first year in Mercedes. But yeah, so at age 36, you got to remember too that his career is going to be winding down eventually. There's only been one driver over the age of 40, which was Nigel Mansell, the Australian Grand Prix in 1994, who won a race at that age in the past 52 years. So since 1969, one driver over 40 has won a race. Again, we've seen that Tom Brady, and as science and all that stuff, sports science gets better, you can defy the odds, hopefully. And I think race cars and F1 and driving is a sport where you can definitely go longer if you want to at a high level. But just worth pointing out that this is kind of where Lewis stands today. Max, on the other hand, on the young side, he's currently 23 years old. While he doesn't have a driver's championship, he does rank 19th all-time in wins right now, going into tomorrow's race, going into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. That is the most career wins of any driver without a driver's championship. So he's also the youngest ever race winner, and he pretty much holds every record for the youngest winner of this, youngest doer of that, with the exception of winning with the exception of winning the driver's championship, because he hasn't done it yet, because unfortunately he's been competing against Lewis Hamilton. That's the other thing to remember about Max, is he's done all this while having to compete against Lewis Hamilton. So really, really impressive stuff on Max's side. And you're looking at, again, if he can get to Hamilton's age, that's 13 more years of driving. You're talking about one of the, I would say, hopefully, he's been, out of the guys that we've been discussing, like the path to the GOAT, he's on the best trajectory of any of them. So, a couple of other things to consider about F1, though, going forward, is that the car is just as important as the driver. I know this podcast episode, whatever you want to call it, is mainly more about tomorrow's race, but as we get into it a little bit further and see when will we start to see those price spikes, you got to remember the car is just as important as the driver. You have plenty of really, really talented drivers. I mean, how many world champions do we have on the grid? We got Alonso, we got Raikkonen, we had Vettel, Max, and those guys, those other three don't even come close to the points half the time. They're sniffing the outside of the points because they're just not in good cars. It's not like Sebastian Vettel at age 34 was a bad driver after winning 4 straight drivers' championship. His car just isn't good. So the car is just as important as the driver. And next year we're going to be seeing a new car design and guidelines. So it's really important to figure out who's going to construct the dominant vehicle next year. So you could see a big swing. Maybe it's not even Red Bull or Mercedes. We don't even know. Maybe McLaren comes out of nowhere, or Ferrari, and it's Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz or Lando's time, or Danny Rick sees a return to greatness. We have no idea. So that's the one real interesting thing moving past Abu Dhabi into 2022 for F1 cars. But F1 also features a 23-race calendar now, so more races allows for more counting stats. So this is good for Max, also good for Lewis. I mean, he still has more years to go in this era as well. But that's a benefit to the really young drivers doing 23 races a year. That allows you to add up wins, add up poles, add up all this stuff. Which, again, if you're talking to people who are aware of context, you'll be able to factor stuff like that in when you discuss the greatest of all time 15 years from now. But it looks nice to have the most wins, to have the most poles, to have the most laps led, to have all that stuff. And more races equal more counting stats. So definitely a benefit to the younger drivers. The other great thing about F1 cars in particular is that they're just so massively underproduced, like beyond crazy how underproduced they are. So I think doesn't matter what happens tomorrow. I think you're going to see the prices of both Max and Lewis continue to grow, just because there's just not enough cars out there to supply the demand. If you look at the way soccer, I mean, more of a global sport, like the world's most popular sport. But if you look how that was when Panini first started making cars in 2014, it was, they produced a good amount of 2014 Prism World Cup. That was like the real first set. And, those cars are worth so much, so much. And now we've gotten to the point where soccer cars are treated like, one of the other major sports in the U.S. here with levels of production. And, soccer cars, I mean, pretty much basketball might be the only thing that comes close to touching soccer prices for the high-end stuff. So you got to look. F1 is not soccer, but you got to remember that we're still in that first super early stage of let's see how this does. And if it catches on, you're going to see, I think a big old wowza of of price increases. You're talking 5x, 8x, 10x on some of these cheaper items. Cheaper meaning sapphire and chrome base stuff. So that's just something to look forward to because I think it's going to happen. But definitely something to keep an eye on too. It really depends on the popularity of F1 in general, and if the card collecting world transitions to F1 the same way it did to soccer, because soccer was the exact same thing as F1. They pretty much had stickers and off-brand sets for decades leading up until the first release in 2014, and now here, less than a decade later, it is one of the biggest markets out there. So. And then as for Hamilton and Max specifically, Hamilton enters. He could enter the most dominant player of his sport in any sport conversation with a couple more titles. If he wins tomorrow and gets to 8, if he gets a couple more after that and gets to 10 drivers titles, that's like when you start getting to Wayne Gretzky type stuff, or be like Will Chamberlain level dominance. So that's a great thing to enter into. Obviously, when you're now being compared cross sport as the greatest ever to do any sport. How dominant were you? So that's something that you would see maybe another price jump for Lewis. And then the other thing to take into account is, we don't really know, but does Lewis Hamilton want to drive until he's 45, like Tom Brady does? We really don't know. That's one of those things just to kind of keep an eye on, because some players say, you know what, I'm done. I had a great run. I want to enjoy the rest of my life. Some people just can't get enough of it, and they want to go until they physically can't go anymore. We don't know where Lewis Hamilton is on that, but he's very Tom Brady-like in his preparation. He always has his trainer following him around. You can see her literally all the time. Every time he gets out of the car, she's there. She's always around. So that is, a good indicator of his dedication to the sport and trying to, continue past age 40. Now, Max, on the other hand, he can really, really, really wind up way ahead of the trajectory that Lewis was on if Red Bull's car proves to be the dominant one in the new era. Can you imagine Max Verstappen at age 20, after his age 25 season? So if he wins tomorrow, Red Bull has the most dominant car, and then he wins, let's say he wins 3 straight, which not unrealistic. You're looking at Max having 50 career wins maybe. He'll be like 3rd or 4th all time with 3 championships at age 25. And at the same time, you got to remember, every year that Max goes forward, Lewis gets older. So that doesn't say that. That doesn't mean that no one else is going to come up. You have George Russell now getting into the Mercedes car. You've got Oscar Piastri, who's seems to be a phenom in his own right. That's probably going to hit the circuit in 2023. So there's a lot of factors to think about and navigate. We don't have enough time to go through all of them. But as far as this goes, the trajectory that we're talking about, man, can Max be light years ahead of where Lewis was, but I don't know if he'll be able to replicate the stretch that Lewis had, that 7-year run. It's probably the greatest 7-year run in the history of the sport. So the other thing about Red Bull is that they're no longer going to be using their Honda engine. They've never developed their own engine before, and starting next year, they will be producing their own engine. They will have the Honda specs and all that, but they will be producing their own engine. So we'll see how that goes. Could be might not be the greatest season for everyone. We really don't know. There's a lot of moving parts here, which kind of makes F1 super duper exciting. But whatever happens tomorrow, the only thing that really matters is that you guys enjoy the race, because I know I will. It's been an amazing season, and it's been a fun ride, a great ride here with all the F1 cars. Let's hope Bottas doesn't go tank commander and drive into everyone bowling ball style in turn 1. But F1 cars to the moon, obviously. So I do thank you guys again for watching. As always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you subscribe here and give me a follow on Instagram and Twitter. It's at BuffsBreaks, BuffsBreaks. I will hopefully I think I'll have a non-F1 related piece out next week. We'll see. I think I got an idea in mind, but I think I'll go basketball probably for next week. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. I certainly appreciate it, and get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow's going to be an exciting one.